small talk doesn't drain you because you're antisocial. It drains you because your mind is built to look for meaning, and most surface-level conversation gives you none. So while everyone else is exchanging comfort, you're still waiting for something real to begin. And that is why a harmless conversation about the weather can leave you feeling more alone than silence ever does. If that feels familiar, this may explain something you've been feeling for years. Most people misread this discomfort. They assume it means something is wrong with them, that they're awkward, too serious, too closed off, too difficult to connect with. So they learn the ritual: smile at the right time, ask about the weekend, comment on the traffic, keep the rhythm going. And sometimes they get good at it. That is what makes it so confusing, because from the outside, nothing looks wrong. The conversation works. The other person seems comfortable. The exchange ends politely. And yet something in you walks away feeling emptier than before. Not because you hate people, because what your mind was actually looking for never arrived. That is the first thing to understand. Small talk is not really about information. Most of the time, the words barely matter. What matters is the rhythm, the tone, the eye contact, the sense that both people understand the rules of the moment. For some people, that is enough. It calms them. It includes them. It gives their nervous system the reassurance it was looking for. But if you are wired a certain way, that same exchange lands differently. It does not feel like connection. It feels like static. Not because the other person is fake, not because the moment is meaningless to everyone, because your mind is listening for something more specific. It is not just listening for presence. It is listening for substance. So when the words stay light, your brain keeps scanning underneath them, waiting for the real thing. A sharper question, a flicker of honesty, a moment where the script breaks and something true enters the room. And when that never happens, something in you starts to pull back. That is the hidden ache. It is not boredom. It is not arrogance. It is the feeling of being present in a conversation where the part of you that wants to be met never gets invited to speak. That is why these moments feel so strangely exhausting. You are not tired from talking. You are tired from staying near connection without ever fully entering it. And here is where it gets more complicated. Most people who hate small talk are actually very good at it. They know when to smile, when to nod, when to ask the return question, when to sound warm enough to keep the exchange moving. From the outside, they can look socially effortless. That is what makes the loneliness so hard to explain. Because the conversation works, the other person leaves feeling fine, maybe even liked, maybe even understood, and you are left with a strange feeling. They responded to me, but not to the part of me that was real. That is the deeper exhaustion. Not just talking, performing, not just being polite, being present in a way that does not feel fully true. And over time, that creates a very specific loneliness. The loneliness of being socially successful in a language that never actually says what you mean. This is also why the whole thing gets mislabeled so often. People see someone like this and assume introversion. And yes, sometimes there is overlap. But the two things are not the same. A lot of introverts can enjoy light chatter. They just need to recover from it later. The person who hates small talk is tired by something else. Not only the social energy, the emotional thinness of it, the gap between what is being said and what could be said, the feeling that something real was possible in this moment, and everyone quietly agreed not to reach for it. That is a different kind of fatigue. Because what people like this want is not deep conversation in the dramatic way others imagine it. They do not need every exchange to become a confession. They are not trying to turn lunch into therapy. What they want is simpler than that, and rarer. They want contact, the feeling that one mind has actually reached another, the sense that someone is speaking from a real place instead of a rehearsed one. That is why they come alive when a conversation suddenly changes shape, when someone stops performing, when the script loosens, when a real question appears. What do you actually think? Was that hard for you? What have you not been saying? It does not even have to be heavy. It just has to be real. That is the difference. They are not hungry for intensity. They are hungry for authenticity, for texture, for weight, for something honest enough to feel alive. That is also why they often come alive in strange, unexpected pockets of life. A late-night kitchen at a party they never wanted to attend. A long drive when nobody feels rushed. A quiet conversation after everyone else has left. Anywhere the performance starts to loosen, they relax, because finally, there is room for something true to happen. But this is where the contradiction begins, because the same person who wants depth the most often avoids the exact places where depth could happen. They skip the gathering. They leave early. They keep their answers short. They tell themselves the people there would never get it anyway. And sometimes that is true, but not always. Sometimes something quieter is happening underneath. A fear, not the fear of talking, the fear of opening. The fear that if they ever let the real version of themselves step forward, the other person would hesitate, go silent, or gently back away. So they protect themselves early. They stay polished. They stay likable. They reveal just enough to remain safe. And over time, that starts to look like preference. It becomes easy to say, I just like being alone more. I just don't enjoy most people. I just don't do surface-level connection. But sometimes that story is covering something more fragile, a belief that what you really are may be too much, too strange, too difficult, or simply too easy to leave. That is the trap. The thing you want most is also the thing that feels least safe to ask for. And small talk, for all its emptiness, has one advantage. It cannot reject what it never truly touches. That is why people stay there, not because it fulfills them, because it protects them. And there is one more reason small talk can feel so draining. People like this are usually noticing far more than they are letting on. They catch the flicker across someone's face when a certain name comes up. They hear the tiny change in tone when someone says, I'm fine. They notice the pause that was a little too long, the laugh that arrived half a second late, the sentence that said one thing while meaning another. Their mind is tracking layers, not only what is being said, but what is leaking through it. And once you notice that much reality in a room, small talk starts asking something very specific of you. It asks you to ignore it, to stay on the surface while your mind is already somewhere underneath it. That is not boredom, that is tension, a quiet strain between what is happening socially and what feels true internally. And for someone built this way, that strain adds up fast, because honesty for them is not just a preference, it is closer to a need. Not blunt honesty, not emotional dumping, just the feeling that what is happening and what is being said belong to the same reality. And when they don't, the conversation starts to feel thin. Not fake exactly, just thin. That is why solitude can feel so relieving afterward. Not because they hate people, because solitude does not ask them to override what they perceive. It does not ask them to flatten what they know. It does not ask them to pretend the surface is the whole story. So maybe this was never really about small talk. Maybe small talk was just the place where you first noticed that your mind does not connect the way other people seem to. Maybe what has exhausted you all this time was not conversation itself, not people, not closeness, not warmth, just the long habit of staying in exchanges that never reached the part of you that was actually there. And once you see that clearly, something shifts. Maybe the problem was never that you dislike people. Maybe the problem is that most people have only seen your social exhaustion and mistaken it for disinterest. Maybe even you have mistaken it for disinterest. Because after enough draining conversations, enough empty exchanges, enough rooms where you stayed present without ever feeling reached, it becomes easy to believe that you are simply not social by nature, that you are closed off, detached, antisocial. But that word has probably been covering something much more human, not a lack of desire for connection, a lack of nourishment from the kind of connection you keep being offered. And that is an entirely different thing, because people who are truly antisocial do not usually ache for something real. They do not usually feel relief when someone finally drops the script. They do not usually come alive the moment a conversation becomes honest. You do. Which means what you have been carrying may not be antisocial at all. It may be something far more specific. A mind that is tired of performance. A nervous system that no longer responds to empty signals. A self that has spent too long being offered contact without being met. And once you understand that, the question changes. It stops being, why am I like this with people? And becomes, what if I was never actually antisocial in the first place? What if I've just been starving for a kind of connection that most people never think to offer? And the signs of that are quieter than most people realize.